Hi, everyone, and welcome to English 3360, Religion and Literature. This is just a quick screencast that I wanted to do to go over a few points in the syllabus and then also another document that's up on Blackboard called Writing a Literary Analysis. My name is Laura Dacus. I have taught online for King for a few years and used to live in the East Tennessee area. Now, my husband and I actually live in upstate New York, but I'm thankful to still have this relationship with King and get to teach courses like this one. This is actually a course that I developed maybe 4 years ago, and I haven't taught it since that time, so I'm really excited to revisit these texts with you in this class. Some of these works are some of my personal favorites, really, so it will be really a blessing for me to revisit them as we work through our different modules throughout this course. In general, this course, Religion and Literature, looks at literary dimensions of religious texts and the ways in which literature influences readers spiritually and morally. And really the last part of that description here on the syllabus is what this course is going to explore. And more specifically, we will be looking at an overall theme that emerges in each of these texts, and that's this theme of homecoming, seen through the parable in the Gospels of the prodigal son. And so the themes of blessing, homecoming, belovedness that run through that parable will be elements that you'll see in all of the texts that we read for this course. I have listed here the texts, and you should be able to access these in a variety of formats: hard copy, audio, or an electronic text, like for a Kindle or an e-reader of some sort. And the first two novels, as you can see, are written by the same author, Marilynne Robinson. Her novel Gilead is the novel that we are going to start out with, and that was published in 2004. And it's almost like a sequel, but kind of thinking of it in terms of a sequel. Sorry, little notification there. Thinking of it in terms of a sequel might not be the best way, but it did come out after Gilead. Home is the name of that novel, and it explores some of the same themes, the same characters, but from a different point of view than Gilead does. And we're actually reading Home in the third module. In our second module, we're reading Tim Keller's The Prodigal God, published in 2008. And then if you look down to the next page, Henry Nouwen's The Return of the Prodigal Son is our primary text for our fourth module. And then we'll be concluding in our fifth module with our main texts, both modernist texts, so published around the turn of the 20th century. Actually, Eugene O'Neill's The Rope was originally performed and published in 1917, and Joseph Conrad's Tomorrow was published in 1902. The Rope, there's actually a PDF that I provided you in Blackboard, so you don't have to access that text on your own or purchase anything there. And then through Project Gutenberg, you can see the link here to where you can read Tomorrow. It has listed here additional resources that you need, just kind of the basic stuff. As far as program outcomes, you can see those listed here. Specifically for this course, our overarching goals are: one, to analyze and interpret aesthetic texts as expressions defined by their genres and historical contexts; two, apply appropriate critical and evaluative techniques to literary texts; three, compare and contrast treatments of specific themes contained in aesthetic texts; four, construct literary interpretations that draw upon fictional and non-fictional works to write formal and informal arguments; and five, understand the Christian tradition and apply that understanding to the reading and interpretation of literature. So these are the overarching goals that we have established, and the outcomes, in the sense that these are the things that you want to be able to demonstrate throughout the course, and certainly by the end of the course. Below here, and this is probably similar to other online courses that you've taken at King, there are some guidelines for online communication, which are pretty straightforward. We're going to talk more about your writing in general and how you want to present yourself through your written expression in both the discussion boards and in your response papers. But this is kind of just an overall set of guidelines, thinking intentionally about how your opinions and your words will be received by others, responding with courtesy, rereading obviously what you've read before hitting submit. Kind of straightforward principles there. So each module begins on Monday of the week and ends on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. And all assignments are due by the end of the module. And there are some, I say that, but then there is one assignment that's due before Sunday night, 11:59 p.m., and that is your initial discussion board post. That post is due Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. And that's to allow time, of course, for people to read your post and respond to it, prior to the end of the week. So I have listed down below here the course topic outline with each module. And I have listed, for instance, right here, the primary text that we have in that module, and then, the deadlines for different things. I realize that probably most of you will not have completely finished reading everything before Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. However, you want to make every effort to read as much of it as possible to allow for your discussion board post to be, thorough and, accurate for the work as a whole, not just like the first 20 pages. You can also see here, we for each module, you have your primary text that you're reading, the assigned readings for that module. You have one initial discussion board post, and then by Sunday at 11:59 p.m., you should respond to the post of at least 2 classmates. And a rubric for discussion boards, which you want to thoroughly read and go over before you begin your first post, is also in Blackboard under, I believe it's the course resources folder, and then under the rubrics folder there. There's also a quiz associated with each module, and there's a tagline basically underneath each quiz, and it gives a description of what that quiz is assessing. So, for instance, if it is assessing your reading of Gilead, your understanding of the glossary terms, and your understanding of the PowerPoint notes. There aren't PowerPoint notes for every module, but you will want to make sure that you review those and, ask any questions if you have questions about those notes before taking the quizzes, because the quizzes do cover that material as well. And then, of course, the response paper that is due at the end of each module. And the response paper is your primary assignment for each module. Then you can see in week 2, our main text is The Prodigal God, but then we also have 2 shorter readings. The first is a short story by Flannery O'Connor called A Good Man is Hard to Find, and the second is an essay by O'Connor called Novelist and Believer. So those are our primary texts. Same sorts of assignments here. You have an initial discussion board post, responses to 2 classmates' posts. You have a quiz, and then response paper 2. And you can see here under the prepare row or this prepare category that there is a term project that's going to be due at the end of Module 4. And you want to read that assignment and review the rubrics for each option for that term project. One option will look more like a traditional literary analysis, and then the other two will give you opportunities to flex your creative writing muscle, so to speak, if you'd like to. So two options are more creative. One is a more traditional academic essay for the term project. And of course, let me know if you have questions about that. That is something you want to really devote some time to, a little bit of time each week, so that it doesn't become something that's really overwhelming in week 4. Okay, and then in week 3, we're reading Home by Marilynne Robinson. That's our only text for study that week. And same assignments, your discussion board, quiz, and response paper. And then in week 4, our main text is shorter this week. You have less reading, which I think will be beneficial for you since your term project is also due at this time. And this is when we're reading Henry Nouwen's The Return of the Prodigal Son. You'll have your discussion boards, your quizzes, you'll have a response paper, and your term project. So there's going to be a lot due on that Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So you really want to budget your time to make sure you've allowed plenty of time to work on and revise those different writing assignments. And then lastly, in week 5, we're reading the 2 modernist literary works that explore themes related to the parable of the prodigal son. And that's Tomorrow and The Rope. And then same assignments here of discussion board post, Module 5 quiz, your Module 5 response paper, and then the additional assignment here is a presentation. And there's instructions regarding the presentation in Blackboard, and this involves your accessing a secondary source of some sort that can be kind of analyzing or interpreting any of the main texts that we have looked at over the course of the term. And you'll be presenting in PowerPoint presentation form. If you don't have PowerPoint, let me know, and you might be able to do a Prezi or some other type of presentation software, use some other type of presentation software. But again, more details will be included in Blackboard about the presentation. And then underneath here, a breakdown of the assignments with percentages for each one. So you can see that your response papers are worth half of your grade. So they are, I don't want to say the most important part, but judging by the grade breakdown here, it would suggest that they are the most important part of the course in terms of your assessment in the course. And then just some course policies. I am going to do my best to have grading done by Wednesday of the week following submission. However, it may end up looking more like Thursday or Friday, but I just appreciate your patience as I get grading done, each week. While we're talking about grading, I want to just direct your attention to this document, which is located in Blackboard. And these are really guidelines for writing your response papers. The writing that you present in this class is the most important part of your participation in the class. Because this is an online class, the way that you communicate your engagement with each of the texts and your comprehension of the content, it's all through the written word. So this is pertaining specifically to the response papers and how you develop those. But the same sort of board posts, you really want to consider, am I presenting here, an original interpretation of this content versus just summarizing and trying to show that I read it. That's not the point. It's assumed that you read it. You don't have to show that you read it. It's your interpretation, your analysis, your original thoughts about it that, of course, will demonstrate that you read it, but will also demonstrate that you engaged with it critically, you thought critically about it, and had some insights that you walked away with. So I'm not going to read this document to you. That would be incredibly tedious for both me and you. But I just want to point out, some overall categories here. This first section, in developing your argument, this is important to think about really from the beginning. Sorry, another Facebook notification. This is important to consider really at the beginning of outlining and planning each of your response papers. So for each module, you'll know what it is you're going to be asked to write about for the response paper, before you even start reading the novel. So, you kind of want to read the work with an eye for how you're going to answer the question posed as the prompt question for that response paper. And developing a working or preliminary thesis statement, as you're sort of working through some of those ideas, determining, what's the main interpretation that you want to make. Your thesis statement, should appear in the introduction, right, paragraph of your paper. And it shouldn't just be kind of a summary or a synopsis. It really should be a strong interpretation or an argument. And if you're really responding to the prompt's question, each of the prompts try to steer you in that direction anyway. Another important step as you're just developing your argument is considering the evidence that you're going to use to support it. And you want to, in a literary analysis, your evidence should either be quotations or like paraphrases or summaries that demonstrate your points that come from the work itself. And in this next section here, I'm giving just some guidelines for how to basically integrate evidence into your essay. And just talking about how you always want to integrate quotes into the grammar of your own sentence. You don't want them to stand alone as their own sentence. These are just a couple simple examples of that right here. Avoiding unnecessary plot summary obviously is important. Introducing characters when you're referencing them for the first time. You don't have to tell their whole life story, of course, but just summarize those elements necessary for making your interpretive claim. So an example, this is a character whom we'll encounter in both Gilead and Home. Jack Boughton, the prodigal son character in Robinson's novels. So this is like the appositive phrase here that's kind of renaming Jack Boughton and introducing him, assuming this was like the first sentence that brought him into my literary analysis. He reopens old wounds for John Ames, who thought that his last months of life would be characterized by peace and serenity. Just a couple points here to remember. We italicize longer prose works like Gilead or Home, and we use quotation marks around short prose works like essays. So when we read Flannery O'Connor's Novelist and Believer, or we put quotation marks around short stories like A Good Man is Hard to Find, which we'll read also by Flannery O'Connor. And we use quotation marks around poems, and this will apply particularly to Module 1 because you're reading some poetry by John Donne and George Herbert. One other point about quoting poetry: if you're quoting 3 lines of poetry or less, then this is how it should appear. You have / mark between your lines, and then your in-text citation should include line numbers as opposed to page numbers. When we're quoting from prose works, it's page numbers. If you're quoting 4 or more consecutive lines of poetry, it needs to be typed as a block quote. Same rule of thumb applies to quoting a large portion of prose. I really don't want to see a lot of long quotations in your papers. I don't really think there's much of a place for long quotations in relatively short literary analyses. So for the most part, you want to keep quotations kind of short and sweet. Find the text that most embodies the point that you're wanting to make, quote it, in a short form, and then analyze and interpret the quote. We will use MLA format for this class, unless, for some reason and based on sort of the field you're interested in or a future career that you foresee yourself in, if APA format would make more sense to you. I have had students in the past ask to use APA format throughout the course, and that's fine as well. Just communicate that to me so I know. But otherwise, we'll be using MLA. And here's how each of your papers should be formatted. I'm not sure if this link actually still works, but if you just type in Purdue OWL, Purdue University's online writing lab, you can access their guide to MLA format, which is very helpful. And then I just have an example here of I have an example here of how you would want to do your in-text citation and kind of lead into a quote if you're only working with one literary work. So if my essay is just analyzing Gilead, I know that Marilynne Robinson is the author, because I've said that in the introduction. So I don't need to keep typing Robinson and then the page number each time. That wouldn't be necessary. So you can see that example right there. So again, that's in Blackboard, and you can go back and look at that, and I would encourage you to spend some time reading through it before your first response paper, just kind of trying to internalize some of those guidelines. Attendance, basically in an online course, this takes the form of logging in regularly, keeping up to date with assignments, these kind of things. Participation, again, in an online course, it's completing assignments, it's logging in consistently. Discussion boards, which again, if you look at the rubric in Blackboard, that has the most information about discussion boards. And then for each module, I give specific instructions about what I want you to write about. So it's not just kind of an open-ended assignment, but I really do try to give you some direction. And I do give you actually 2 choices for each discussion board post. So you don't have to respond to both questions. It's an either or kind of situation. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions about that. And as we've already discussed, you want your initial post to be on the discussion board by Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. Just a reminder about the email policy. You do need to email me from your King email. Here's a breakdown of the grading scale. A reminder here about the honor code. Any breaches of academic integrity, any acts of academic dishonesty, which most often take the form of plagiarism in English courses, will be handled swiftly. I take plagiarism very seriously. So, depending on the situation, it can mean a 0 for the assignment or for the entire course. So if you have any questions about how to cite your sources correctly or how to show proper attribution to authors, please ask those because the penalties are severe. Let me know if you are in need of any type of accommodation, and if there's any changes, I will let you know just as soon as possible. I can't foresee that at this point. If anything, I try to just from time to time, maybe give an extra day on something or that kind of thing. However, you don't want to expect that. But, going by the syllabus, try to plan accordingly to get assignments done at the appropriate time. So I think that's it. I'm I'm excited to be teaching this course, and again to be revisiting these texts that have been very influential in different ways for me. And I hope and I pray that um, this will be a, a good experience for you in this online course, a meaningful experience. I know, we all come from different places, um, different backgrounds, spiritually speaking, and but I hope that for each of us that there will be some things to chew on and to kind of meditate on at the end of this course. So please don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions. I look forward to working with you.